Princess Isabella stood at the tall windows of the royal palace, watching the protesters gather in the courtyard below. Their angry voices carried through the stone walls, demanding answers that she wasn't sure she could give. Her hands trembled as she clutched the letter that had arrived that morning, the letter that would change everything. "Your Highness," came a gentle voice behind her. Isabella turned to see her lady-in-waiting, Margaret, approaching with careful steps. "Prince Alexander has returned from his meeting with the council. He's asking for you in the study." Isabella's heart sank. She had been dreading this moment for weeks, ever since the scandal broke. The investigation had revealed corruption deep within the royal treasury, and somehow, through a series of unfortunate connections, both she and Alexander had become the focus of public anger. The people they had sworn to serve now viewed them with suspicion and rage. Walking through the marble corridors that had once felt like home, Isabella now felt like a stranger in her own palace. Servants avoided her eyes, and the usual warm greetings had been replaced by formal bows and uncomfortable silence. The weight of the crown she wore seemed heavier with each step. She found Alexander in his study, slumped in the leather chair behind his desk. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, his tie loose, his hair unkempt, and dark circles under his eyes. When he looked up at her, she saw a pain that matched her own. "The council has made their decision," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "They want us to step down temporarily while the investigation continues. They believe it's the only way to restore faith in the monarchy." Isabella felt the room spinning around her. "Step down? But we've done nothing wrong, Alexander. You know that. I know that. This is all based on lies and misunderstandings." "I know," he replied, standing slowly and moving toward her. "But the evidence they've presented. It looks bad, Isabella. Very bad. My signature on documents I don't remember signing. Your meetings with officials who are now under arrest. Even I'm starting to question what really happened." The princess felt tears stinging her eyes. "Are you saying you don't trust me?" Alexander reached for her hands, but she pulled away. "I'm saying that someone has worked very hard to make us look guilty. And until we can prove our innocence, our presence here is hurting the kingdom we love." Isabella walked to the bookshelf, running her fingers along the spines of books they had read together during happier times. "Do you remember when we first met? You told me that being royal meant putting the kingdom before everything else, even ourselves." "I remember," Alexander said softly. "I thought I understood what that meant then. I thought it meant working hard, making sacrifices, being a good example." Her voice broke slightly. "I never thought it would mean giving up everything we've built together." Alexander approached her slowly, as if she might run away. "The council isn't asking us to divorce, Isabella. They're asking us to step back from our duties until this mess is sorted out. We could go to the countryside estate, away from all this chaos. And abandon our people when they need us most?" Isabella turned to face him, her eyes flashing with determination. "The kingdom is in crisis, Alexander. The economy is struggling. There are natural disasters in the northern provinces, and now this corruption scandal. This is exactly when the royal family should be present, showing strength and leadership." "But we can't lead if the people don't trust us," Alexander argued, his voice growing stronger. "Every decision we make is questioned. Every appearance we make is met with protests. We're not helping anyone by staying." Isabella sat down heavily in the chair opposite his desk. "What does your heart tell you to do?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment. "My heart tells me to fight, to stand beside you and prove our innocence, to show everyone that we're the same people they loved just 6 months ago." He paused, struggling with his words. "But my mind tells me that sometimes love means letting go." "The investigation could take years," Isabella said quietly. "Our children would grow up in exile, always wondering if their parents were criminals. The kingdom would move on without us. We might never get our lives back. I know, Alexander admitted. But what choice do we have? If we stay and fight, we tear the country apart. If we leave, we at least give them a chance to heal. Isabella stood up abruptly, pacing to the window again. The crowd below had grown larger. She could see news reporters setting up cameras, preparing to broadcast their decision to the world. There has to be another way. Someone orchestrated this whole thing, Alexander. Someone wanted us gone, and we're just giving them exactly what they want. Then what do you suggest? Alexander asked, joining her at the window. Should we ignore the council's recommendation? Should we refuse to step down and watch the kingdom tear itself apart? Isabella leaned against him, drawing strength from his presence even as they faced their greatest challenge. I don't know, she whispered. I just know that whatever we decide will change everything, not just for us, but for everyone who believed in us. Alexander wrapped his arms around her, both of them watching the crowd below. The Prime Minister is coming tomorrow morning for our final decision. We have tonight to figure out what kind of legacy we want to leave. As the sun set over the kingdom they had served with such dedication, Princess Isabella and Prince Alexander stood together, knowing that by morning their lives would never be the same. The weight of a nation's future rested on their shoulders, and the decision they made would echo through history. Neither of them slept that night, each lost in their own thoughts about duty, love, sacrifice, and the impossible choices that come with wearing a crown. The clock in the royal chamber struck midnight as Princess Isabella sat on the edge of their bed, still wearing the same dress from earlier. She had been staring at their wedding photo on the nightstand, an image of two young people full of hope and dreams for their future together. Prince Alexander found her there, having spent the last hour walking the empty palace halls. I've been thinking about our wedding day, Isabella said without looking up. Do you remember what the Archbishop said about the burden of service? Alexander sat beside her, the bed creaking slightly under their combined weight. He said that true service requires the courage to make choices others cannot understand. I thought he was talking about policy decisions, budget cuts, or trade agreements. Isabella finally looked at him, her eyes red from crying. I never imagined he meant choosing between love and duty. Alexander took her hand, noticing how cold her fingers felt. What if they're not different things? What if loving you means protecting the kingdom you care about so deeply? Isabella pulled her hand away, standing abruptly. Don't make this about protecting me. We both know what stepping down really means. It means admitting guilt we don't have. It means letting whoever did this to us win. Isabella, please listen to me. Alexander's voice was strained with exhaustion and emotion. I've spent all night going through every document, every meeting, every decision we've made in the past 2 years. Someone has been very clever about this. They've created a web of evidence that makes us look guilty, even though we're innocent. Then we fight it, Isabella said fiercely. We hire the best lawyers, we demand a public hearing, we destroy the monarchy in the process, Alexander interrupted, his voice louder than he intended. Do you think the people will wait patiently while we spend months in court? Do you think they'll just trust us while their lives fall apart? Isabella spun around to face him, her eyes blazing. So we just give up. We let them win. We abandon everything our families built for generations? We save it, Alexander said quietly, standing to meet her gaze. By stepping aside, we give the institution a chance to survive. My brother Charles can serve as regent. The monarchy continues, just without us. Without us, Isabella repeated, her voice hollow. Do you hear yourself, Alexander? You're talking about throwing away 12 years of marriage, our children's birthright, our life's work, all based on lies. Alexander moved closer to her, but she stepped back. I'm talking about sacrifice, the kind of sacrifice that real leaders make when the situation demands it. Real leaders fight for their people. Isabella shot back. They don't run away when things get difficult. This isn't running away. Alexander's composure finally cracked, his voice echoing through the chamber. This is the hardest decision I've ever had to make. Do you think I want to leave? Do you think I want to watch someone else sit on the throne I was born to occupy? Isabella stared at him, shocked by his outburst. In all their years together, she had rarely seen him lose control like this. Then why are you so ready to give up? Alexander sat down heavily, burying his face in his hands. Because I love you more than the crown, Isabella, and I love this kingdom more than my own pride. If staying means watching both of those things burn, then I choose to leave. Isabella felt her anger deflating, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. She sat down beside him again, this time taking his hand in hers. What about our children? Emma is only 8 years old. How do we explain to her that Mommy and Daddy had to leave because some people told lies about us? We tell her the truth, Alexander said, his voice muffled by his hands. We tell her that sometimes being a good person means making choices that hurt because they help other people. She won't understand, Isabella whispered. She will someday. When she's older and faces her own difficult choices, she'll understand that we chose to protect the kingdom instead of ourselves. Isabella stood up and walked to the window that overlooked the palace gardens. Even in the moonlight, she could see the security barriers that had been erected to keep protesters away. The Prime Minister called earlier. He said the evidence is being reviewed by an international committee now. Other kingdoms are starting to question their alliances with us. I know, Alexander said. If this continues, it won't just be our kingdom that suffers. Trade relationships, defense agreements, diplomatic ties, everything our parents and grandparents worked to build could be destroyed. Isabella pressed her forehead against the cool glass. I keep thinking there must be something we're missing, some piece of evidence, some witness who could clear our names, someone who knows the truth and is waiting for the right moment to speak up. Maybe there is, Alexander agreed. But how long do we wait? How much damage do we let happen while we search for proof that might not exist? Isabella turned away from the window, her decision finally crystallizing in her mind. You're right, she said quietly, the words feeling like glass in her throat. If we truly love this kingdom, we have to let it go. Alexander looked up at her, surprised by her sudden change. Isabella? The council is right. Our presence here is causing more harm than good. Every day we stay, the crisis deepens. Every day we fight this, the people lose more faith in the monarchy. She sat down beside him, taking both of his hands in hers. But I have conditions. What conditions? We don't disappear quietly. We make a public statement explaining our decision. We tell the people that we're stepping down not because we're guilty, but because we love them too much to let our situation hurt them further. Alexander nodded slowly. What else? We set a timeline. If the investigation clears us within 2 years, we have the right to return. If not, Isabella's voice trailed off. If not, we build a new life somewhere else, Alexander finished for her. And we never let anyone forget that we were innocent, Isabella added firmly. Whatever happens, our children will know the truth. History will know the truth. Alexander pulled her into his arms, both of them crying now. I'm so sorry, Isabella. I'm sorry that loving me meant giving up everything you dreamed of. Don't apologize for loving me, she whispered against his shoulder. Promise me that wherever we go, whatever we do, we'll face it together. Promise me that this isn't the end of our story, just the end of this chapter. I promise, Alexander said, his voice breaking. I promise that someday, somewhere, we'll find a way to be happy again. As dawn approached, Princess Isabella and Prince Alexander held each other in the bedroom where they had shared so many dreams and plans for the future. In a few hours, they would face the Prime Minister and the Council. They would announce their decision to a heartbroken nation. They would begin the process of dismantling the life they had built together. But in that moment, in the quiet darkness before the storm, they were just a man and woman who loved each other enough to sacrifice everything for the greater good. The decision was made, and though it would break their hearts, they knew it was the right choice. The kingdom would survive, their love would endure, and someday, perhaps, the truth would set them free. 6 months had passed since Princess Isabella and Prince Alexander made their announcement to the nation. The small cottage in the countryside felt like a different world from the palace they had called home for so many years. Isabella was in the garden teaching their daughter Emma how to plant vegetables when she heard the familiar sound of Alexander's car pulling into the gravel driveway. "Daddy's home!" Emma called out, dropping her small watering can and running toward the house. Isabella smiled, watching her daughter's carefree happiness. The transition had been hardest on the children, but they were adjusting better than anyone had expected. Alexander emerged from the car carrying a newspaper and wearing the simple clothes of a private citizen, jeans and a sweater that Isabella had bought him from the local shop. The formal suits and ceremonial uniforms were packed away in boxes, reminders of a life that felt increasingly distant. "How was your meeting with the lawyer?" Isabella asked as he approached, noting the tension in his shoulders. "Good news, actually," Alexander replied, though his smile seemed cautious. "They've found something. A bank account in Switzerland that connects several of the officials who testified against us. It looks like they were all being paid by the same source." Isabella felt her heart skip a beat. "Does this mean—" "It means we might have been right all along. Someone did orchestrate this whole thing." Alexander sat down on the wooden bench beside their vegetable garden. "The lawyer thinks we could have enough evidence to clear our names within the year." Isabella sat beside him, her hands still dirty from gardening. "What does that mean for us? For the kingdom?" Alexander was quiet for a moment, watching Emma chase butterflies in the meadow beyond their garden. "I don't know. The council would have to formally invite us back. The people would have to accept us again, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to return to that life." Isabella looked at him in surprise. "What do you mean?" "Look at us, Isabella. Really look at us. When was the last time we had a conversation without worrying about protocol or public opinion? When was the last time we put our children to bed without security guards outside their door?" Isabella considered his words. It was true. Their life here had been simpler, more genuine. She had learned to cook, something she had never done in the palace. Alexander had started writing, something he had always wanted to do but never had time for. They had become real neighbors in their small community, helping with local charity events and school fundraisers. "The people in town don't see us as royalty," she said thoughtfully. "They see us as Alex and Bella, the couple who moved in down the road." "Exactly. Mrs. Henderson doesn't curtsy when she brings us vegetables from her garden. The children at Emma's school don't treat her like a princess. They treat her like a friend." Alexander reached for Isabella's dirty hand, intertwining their fingers. Maybe this whole crisis was a blessing in disguise. "But the kingdom," Isabella started. "The kingdom is doing well. Charles has been an excellent regent. The corruption investigation has cleaned up decades of problems we didn't even know existed. The economy is recovering, and the people have regained their trust in the monarchy." Alexander paused. "Maybe they didn't need us as much as we thought they did." Isabella stood up and walked toward the fence that separated their property from the meadow. A group of horses was grazing peacefully in the distance. "I had a call from Margaret today. She said the palace feels empty without us, but the staff has adjusted. The royal duties are being handled efficiently." "Are you sad about that?" Alexander asked, joining her at the fence. "I thought I would be," Isabella admitted. "I spent my entire adult life believing that my purpose was tied to that crown, to those responsibilities. But watching Emma grow up here, seeing you write your book, learning who I am when I'm not performing for the public, I'm discovering a different kind of purpose. Alexander nodded toward the small schoolhouse visible in the distance. Emma's teacher told me she wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up. Not a queen, not a princess, a veterinarian. She wants to help animals. She's finding her own path, Isabella said with pride. Not the path that was chosen for her before she was even born. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the horses and listening to Emma's laughter as she played in the garden. Finally, Alexander spoke again. The lawyer says we need to make a decision soon. If we want to return to the palace, we should start the process now. The investigation will conclude in a few months, and if we're cleared— And if we don't want to return? Isabella asked. Then we formally renounce our titles. We become private citizens permanently. Emma grows up as a normal child, not as a member of the royal family. Isabella thought about her daughter's bright smile, her new friendships, her dreams of helping animals instead of ruling a nation. What does your heart tell you now? Alexander smiled at the question, the same one she had asked him that terrible night in the palace. My heart tells me that I've found something here that I never had before. Peace. Real happiness. A life built on love instead of duty. Mine tells me the same thing, Isabella said softly. I miss the palace sometimes. I miss feeling like we were making a difference on a grand scale. But I don't miss the pressure, the constant scrutiny, the feeling that every word and gesture was being judged. Emma came running toward them, her arms full of wildflowers. Look what I found, Mommy. Can we put them in a vase for the kitchen? Of course, sweetheart, Isabella said, kneeling down to receive the bouquet. They're beautiful. Mrs. Henderson taught me which ones are safe to pick and which ones we should leave for the bees, Emma explained seriously. She knows everything about flowers and gardens and animals. She sounds like a very wise teacher, Alexander said, ruffling his daughter's hair. She says that sometimes the most important things we do are the small, quiet things that nobody else notices, Emma continued, like taking care of plants or being kind to animals or helping our neighbors. Isabella and Alexander exchanged a meaningful look over their daughter's head. From the mouth of babes, Isabella thought. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Isabella and Alexander sat on their front porch, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the stars. The newspaper with the story about their potential vindication lay unopened on the table between them. We could have it all back, Alexander said quietly. The palace, the titles, the respect, the power to make real changes in the world. We could, Isabella agreed. But would we be happy? Would Emma be happy? Would we be the same people we've become, or would we go back to being the people we were before? Alexander reached for her hand. I think we both know the answer to that. Isabella smiled, feeling a weight lifting from her shoulders that she hadn't even realized was there. Tomorrow I'll call the lawyer. We'll tell him our decision. No regrets? Alexander asked. Only one, Isabella said, leaning against his shoulder. I regret that it took a crisis to help us discover who we really are and what truly makes us happy. Alexander kissed the top of her head. Then it wasn't really a crisis at all. It was a gift. The next morning, Isabella made the call that would change their lives forever. Not by returning them to their former roles, but by freeing them to embrace the life they had built in exile. The palace would find other occupants. The kingdom would thrive under new leadership. And in a small cottage in the countryside, a former prince and princess would continue to write their own story. One built on love, authenticity, and the courage to choose happiness over duty. The nation would remember them as the royals who sacrificed their crown for their principles. History would debate whether they made the right choice. But for Isabella, Alexander, and Emma, there was no doubt. They had found something more valuable than any throne. They had found themselves. And in the years that followed, as they built their quiet life of purpose and meaning, they never once looked back with regret. They had learned that sometimes the greatest act of service is knowing when to step aside, and the greatest act of love is choosing to build a life based on truth rather than expectations.